The Warhammer 40,000 setting is great. It's big, it's stupid, and it's unashamedly over the top. It's a setting where the galaxy is in perpetual war and mankind is surrounded on all sides by enemies which may or may not be largely futuristic versions of fantasy tropes. It's mostly based around battles between the Imperium of Man, its alien enemies, and traitorous humans who've turned to the dark gods of chaos.
The tabletop miniature game, usually simply referred to as 40k, is made by Games Workshop and is now over 25 years old. The thing is, the tabletop game, great fun as it is, doesn't always manage to capture the visceral nature of the story surrounding it because, it's just little plastic dudes and dice.
I guess it was inevitable that they'd branch out into other mediums. There's books, audio dramas, role-playing games, even a movie, but here we're going to take a look at the video games it spawned, more specifically the original run of games that were made in the 90s, before THQ started publishing them. The very first 40k video game was Space Crusade. It was released in 1992 on systems like the Amiga, ZX Spectrum, and as you see here, MS-DOS. It's based on the board game of the same name that was the 40k equivalent of the Warhammer Fantasy spin-off, Hero Quest. The basic gist of the game is that you move a squad of Space Marines around corridors encountering various enemies like Orcs, Chaos Space Marines, Dreadnoughts, and whatever the hell that is, and you can either shoot or punch them until they explode. We've never played the board game, but it's apparently a pretty faithful recreation, except for the punch explosions, presumably.
With its board game roots, it's turn-based, and the outcome of your actions are decided by virtual dice rolling. It also allows you to be really stupid. Shoot a rocket too close to your dudes? Whoops, you exploded them. Shoot a plasma gun through a marine? Well, your enemy's dead, but your friend's nothing more than a smoking pair of boots.
We've made fun of its title screen before, but I can't say it's unfitting, as 40k isn't exactly the most subtle setting, and in all honesty, as the first 40k game, Space Crusade wasn't a bad start.
In 1993, we got the first adaptation of Space Hulk, another 40k spin-off board game based around clearing hallways with Space Marines. However, this time you're not dicking around and clad in full Terminator armor with Brian fucking May on the soundtrack.
Really? The song that plays at the start of the game was by a band called D-Rock, who did songs about 40k and was signed to Games Workshop's record label, back when they were cool enough to have a record label, and the band met May when he brought his son into a store and he ended up offering his services for a couple of songs. One of these songs, Get Out of My Way, ended up on Space Hulk's soundtrack.
Space Hulk was pretty ambitious at the time. The main view is from a first-person perspective, and you can swap between the members of your squad at will to control them manually. However, you're still basically stuck on a grid and can only rotate in sharp 90-degree turns. There really isn't any friendly AI to speak of beyond shoot the thing in front of you, so if you want to have your squad even remotely organised, then you have to manually tell them where to go, which, as well as being a bit of a pain in the arse, leaves you open to attack. Fortunately, you can pause the game whilst issuing these orders. When you think about it, it's basically a really early example of a squad-based tactical FPS, and this came out around 6 months before Doom.
Of course, the downside is that you're essentially trying to watch 5 different perspectives at once, so when shit starts going south, you tend to have all you guys die in a couple of seconds.
All Terminators dead.
I'd say the game was too hard, but that harsh difficulty does make every firefight tense, and I imagine that's exactly what the developers wanted, to create a game that was oppressive and felt hostile, and, well, if that's the case, then they managed it. There's around 50 levels, so if you get into it, there's plenty of content, and the game's artwork's pretty nice, the intro especially capturing the early 40k vibe perfectly, even if the voice acting and lip syncing is a little weird.
We are the mailed fist of the Emperor.
A sequel to Space Hulk, Vengeance of the Blood Angels, came out in 1995 on the 3DO of all things, but came out on systems people actually owned, like the PC, PlayStation and Saturn a year later. It was very similar to the first game, but improved on greatly. The viewpoints of your teammates, which were honestly just distracting, were removed and it had a more traditional FPS feel. The difficulty is still there, but you feel much more in control, and if it's still too hard, well, you can always turn the difficulty down in this one at least.
There's also more enemy types, more weapons, and the improved graphics don't exactly hurt either. The PC version could also apparently handle LAN games, so you and your friends could get together and kill Xenos as a team, which I imagine would have been a blast if, you had friends. All in all, Vengeance of the Blood Angels was a good sequel. It didn't exactly go crazy with innovation, sure, but it took the original idea and refined it.
Next we got a game based on yet another 40k spin-off. 1997's Final Liberation was based on the Epic game system, which used much smaller scale models, so its battles ended up larger scale, if you catch my drift.
I don't know about this one. We've said it before how the tabletop game's only real drawback, apart from the exorbitant cost of models, is that you can only really imagine the bloody melees your units are supposed to be in. And all the previous games at least made an attempt to make you feel close to that over-the-top blood and guts action that's described in the fluff, but Final Liberation is just so far pulled out that you feel detached from what's going on.
If you're way more into turn-based strategy games than us, then you probably get more of a kick from it, but to us it's just not got that 40k flair. That is until the cutscenes, of course, which are absolutely magnificent. Tease.
Around this time, we should probably mention that these games have been all but abandoned by their publishers, developers, and even Games Workshop themselves. They're unlikely to ever be re-released or patched, so they have their fair share of bugs when running on a modern PC. Space Crusade doesn't run at the correct speed without fiddling around with DOSBox's settings. Space Hulk doesn't even run on the latest version, so you have to install a separate older version of DOSBox. And those marvellous Final Liberation cutscenes don't work on modern machines at all, so the only way most people can see them is on YouTube.
But none of these issues even come close to what's wrong with 1998's Chaos Gate. For starters, it refuses to be recorded by any means we usually use, so this is as good as you're getting, and it catastrophically crashes on your enemy's first turn.
Apparently it's to do with the cultist firing animation or sound or something. It just isn't compatible with any Windows system released after it. The only workarounds people have discovered is to either kill all the cultists before they get a chance to attack, which is no small feat, or edit the game files to prevent the cultists from being able to fire or even spawning. On extremely rare occasions the game will run fine and the cultists can fire, but I've not been able to figure out any rhyme or reason behind it. It's the sort of game where even the bugs are broken.
It's a pity the game's so fucked, because this was the first 40k video game that was actually 40k. It wasn't based off any spin-off board games or variant systems or anything, and it's basically just unplayable to the vast majority of people now. The game seems pretty cool too, similar to Space Crusade, with the grid-based movement and small Space Marine squad, just more advanced and with a proper story.
The last game we'll look at today is 99's Rights of War, which is more of what you'd expect, turn-based grid movement, but holds a few distinctions that separate it from what came before. For one, it's the first game that focuses squarely on an alien race. The Eldar are the stars this time. They're essentially space elves, mostly because that's what they originally were. So for once, the noble Imperium of Man is portrayed as the bunch of murderous dicks they are. It's 40k, even the good guys are bastards.
Its grid is also hexagonal rather than square, which is a little weird, and it has the loudest footstep noises I've ever heard. The visuals aren't particularly mind-blowing, they're not terrible, but compared to the previous couple of games that use an isometric view to create the illusion of 3D space, it just looks really flat.
On the plus side, there's a library of info on the units, with nice rendered versions of the models that I remember back from when I first played 40k back in 1998. What can I say, it gets me a little nostalgic.
So, what have we learned from this trip into early 40k video games? Well, we've learned that some still hold up pretty well and are worth a play if you're interested in the setting. Were they great, timeless games that help sculpt the gaming landscape? No, not really, but they are a time capsule.
40k would change a lot over the years, both in tone and aesthetic. A lot of the tongue-in-cheek humour present in the old stuff faded away and the paint schemes became less vibrant. These games serve as a nice reminder of an era that's just not around anymore, and even as people who prefer the more modern feel of 40k, we can still get a kick out of immersing ourselves in that old school vibe. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more 40k videos, then click the links below.
If you like this video and you'd like to see more stuff like this, then, well, let us know.
And if you didn't like it, then don't tell us, because this video took a really long time to make, and I don't know if my self-esteem could take it if you didn't like it.
So I sat up and I realized that every little lobster didn't have to die, and the bubbling back left to stew while the other little lobsters get a look out through. Wait a minute, don't they have claws powerful enough to rip a tiger apart? Oh shit, fuck that. I want none of it. We'll put all the oceans. Well, let me know.
So if you liked the video and you'd like to see us more, then maybe you should, call. I mean, seriously, we haven't heard from you in, how long? You forget that you're our friend, It's, fuck, man.
Exorbitant.
It's absorbent cost of
It's
models.
absorbent cost of models. Games Workshop's latest idea, absorbent models. That way you have to use 4 times the amount of paint.